When you decided not to do stand-up anymore, what was and you said, I'm going to go be a writer, maybe produce, not even movies you were thinking, just write comedy. What was the first job you went and took?
Well, I did it simultaneously because I realized that comedians didn't want to sell their jokes.
Right.
So I said, if I will write jokes for comics, I could pay my rent.
Right.
And so the first big job, well, I wrote for George Wallace.
Oh, wow.
And George Wallace said, John, I got 3 types of jokes. Stupid shit, things I don't understand, and what if I was president? Huh. And I would write all these jokes for him. And he
Could you make money doing that? I mean, how much would he pay you for a joke? I always hear it's like $4 a joke or something.
Well, I mean, say it was $50 a joke.
Okay.
Or even say it was $25 a joke. If I could make $100 a week,
you're all set.
Make $200 at Comic Relief and another $200 doing stand-up. If I'm at $400 a week, I'm paying the rent.
Yeah, right. Wow.
And then I got a job writing the Grammys for Shandling. I met Shandling.
Wow.
And I wrote
that's a big
jokes
break.
for him. Yeah, and so
Shandling, one of the best stand-up comics, right?
Yeah, nobody better. Nobody better at any of it than Shandling. Really.
Shandling was amazing.
He said he needed jokes for the Grammys. I was at a comedy club in Dallas, Texas, and I thought, oh, I better impress this guy so that he can't get rid of me.
Right.
So I stayed up all night, and I wrote like 100 jokes in one night.
Uh-huh.
And I sent them to him, and then I went over them with him on the phone. Now, none of the jokes were really good, but Garry didn't really know anything about modern music. So it was like explaining the premises, and then Garry would tell me the right punchline.
I see. So it was a good collaboration.
Yes.
Wow. And then hanging out with Garry Shandling, he's the guy who convinced you actually to become a director, right? He let you direct an episode of Larry Sanders, which is the greatest TV show there ever was, right?
Yeah, there's nothing better. And out of the blue, I never asked Garry to direct. Just one day he just said, hey, you're directing the next episode.
Wow. Did you shit your pants when he said you never directed in your life? So you wrote some of the episodes of the Larry Sanders Show?
I was there for 5 seasons in all different capacities.
Okay, so you were a writer too on that. And so he just walks up and says, I think you could direct.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had avoided directing because I was so bad at film in college that I had this fear that I would put the film together and everyone's eye lines would be wrong. I just had this irrational fear that it just wouldn't make sense.
I have nightmares about that.
Yeah.
Because when I used to do editing in college and stuff, I always have this nightmare that I'm not going to know how to edit. I'm not going to be able to do it. It's a very difficult process. So when you do that, do you rely on the help of others, or do you suddenly realize, hey, I'm really good at this thing? And do you start bossing people around? Can you go up to Garry and go, Garry, you didn't nail that scene. Here's how I would do it, or something.
Well, no, because the Larry Sanders Show is the worst scenario to learn how to direct on because you're directing Rip Torn day one.
Right, and he's the greatest actor ever, right?
Yes, I mean he learned acting around the greatest actors and actresses of all time.
Right,
and he doesn't want notes.
So you don't do that.
Well, I read a book the night before, which is about acting that David Mamet wrote, and he thinks that actors just should say the lines.
Right.
He's like, if you're playing someone who's sad, you don't have to actually get sad. You just have to look like you're sad, but you don't actually feel sad. That's his theory.
Right.
And but he basically said, if you give anyone a very small direction, like if you go, hey, Rip, do it like a tiny bit angrier, it'll change everything they do.
Right.
Like you don't have to give them 20 thoughts. You can give them one teeny thought. But even that was terrifying.
Yeah, it is terrifying because you don't want to tell Rip Torn how to act, especially if you've never directed before. Now, do you ever look at that episode and go, oh my God, I would have done this a completely different way, or are you reasonably happy with it?
You know what? Garry was right next to me the whole time, so it's actually a really good episode, but mainly because of Garry.